Okay, so Quench. First of all, Quench is a project designed to explore the role of environmental quality in the human health benefits of connecting with nature. Right, it was funded by NERC, the Natural Environment Research Council, with short-term funding, but which was intended to provide a platform for the development of a longer-term network. Now, this is the core Quench team. You'll be hearing from most of them at some point today. I'm Andy Ewell. I'm from Lancaster University and I'm a social scientist. But as you can see, the team is made up of a mix of environmental scientists, social scientists, psychologists, and health researchers. And the network itself is likewise intentionally interdisciplinary. And crucially, it also includes practitioners from the public, private, and third sectors, because that breadth of interdisciplinarity in connection with real-world, real-time experience is vital for investigating these questions around environmental quality, nature connectedness, and health outcomes. So we all know that contact with nature has physical and mental health benefits, and research on nature connectedness suggests that those benefits don't just come automatically from exposure to nature, they're dependent on the ways in which people engage with the environment. But there's a lot less understanding about how the quality of the environment affects nature connectedness. So, for example, how ecosystem health or water quality or biodiversity levels affect how we mentally and emotionally connect with nature. And so, via nature connectedness, how environmental quality impacts on human health outcomes and on pro-environmental behaviours. So Quench is basically about establishing a network of people interested in investigating these connections together. So the main activity of the network to date started with a series of workshops in February and March this year. With the help of our 5 excellent mentors, these workshops started to build a diverse community of researchers and practitioners, creating a springboard for collaborative research projects that are firmly based in real-world needs. The key outcome of the workshops was the development of 5 proof of concept studies, and they'll run from April to October this year, funded by the network and carried out by workshop participants. And you'll hear more about each of those this afternoon. But we want the network to develop way beyond these workshops and these projects, both in terms of scale and duration, because the idea is to sow the seeds for long-term collaborations and help to provide direction and a set of resources for a new research and practice community. And that is Quench in a nutshell. So today we're going to start with some short networking sessions, because part of the point of this is to build the network, to introduce to people in this space that you haven't met before. We're going to have 2 5-minute sessions in random breakouts where we'd like you to discuss the questions that Jess will hopefully type into the chat now, basically about your interest in this space and what brought you here. We then got our first keynote, followed by a rapid fire set of updates from 3 of the funded projects and a panel session, Q&A session with all of them. We'll then have a short break, very short, and we'll hear from the other 2 projects, again with a panel Q&A, and then another breakout where you can discuss what you've heard and what ideas and questions it's raised for you, and obviously get to meet some more people. We then have our second keynote, after which Mark from the Quench team will wrap us up and send us on our way for 4 o'clock. Some general housekeeping before we move on. Keep your cameras on if you can, please, so that we know that you're out there. Keep your mics off unless you're speaking, and please enjoy yourselves. So that's a very brief introduction. And Mark, are you ready to send people to the first breakout?
Great. So welcome back. I hope you all had a good conversation and perhaps met some familiar faces or talked to someone that you've met with before. So what we're going to have now is a keynote from one of our workshop members who participated in the workshops back in the spring, Dave Bell from Natural England. He's Natural England's lead for a strategy for connecting people with nature to improve health and well-being. And Dave is going to be telling us about Natural England's vision of thriving nature for people and planet. So if Dave, are you here? Are you here to share your slides?
Yep.
Pass over to you.
Thank you and hello everybody. I think I've just unmuted myself. Just give me a nod if you can hear me. Oh,
I can
okay,
hear you.
perfect.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. First task complete. Yes, I'll share my screen in a minute. I just want to say hello. This is my face. I'm very thankful to Liverpool University and Charlotte today, who's been able to let me use her office. I was just come from the NHS Expo down the road from here, which has been a 2-day event for NHS colleagues looking at a number of issues, but today they launched their greener NHS plan, which has been brilliant, and there's been a lot of enthusiasm around it. It is a very carbon neutral plan, so I think the message today that I've got is this message around biodiversity, around nature, around nature's role in addressing climate change, reversing biodiversity loss, and supporting people's health and well-being is something that we really need to keep pushing. There is a risk that the whole green agenda just gets consumed into this net zero carbon narrative. But on a positive side, it was great. There was so much talk about the environment at that conference, and maybe next year there'll be a nature recovery launch at the conference. So I'll just share my screen here, and I can see Mark. I can see you on screen. Can you give me a nod if you can see the presentation? Brilliant. I'll put it onto full screen mode. Hopefully that's excellent. Thank you. So yes, this is our vision. I think I've got 10 minutes to talk, and I won't do justice to everything we're doing in this area in those 10 minutes. I think 5 or 6 years ago when I joined Natural England, I might have been able to give an overview in 10 minutes. But I think that's really shown how the work area has grown for us as an organisation. So we are still talking to large landowners. We still have a big role in things like agri-environment schemes, etc., food security. But now we have a much bigger role in terms of nature recovery in urban areas and connecting people with nature. So our big mission is around those partnerships that we're building. And I think this QUENCH network's been one of the sort of most vibrant networks I've been part of over the past few years, actually, which does bring in that urban agenda with nature recovery, with people and health and well-being. So first of all, a big sort of thank you to the network as a whole. So I sit in our Connecting People with Nature team, and the Connected People with Nature team has a big role to play in delivering the Nature Recovery Network, which is Natural England's and DEFRA's vision for how we're going to reverse biodiversity loss, but also how we're going to connect more people with nature. And that will have a number of nature recovery areas, but also there'll be local nature recovery strategies that are now mandated through the Environment Act, where local authorities and relevant authorities will have to outline their plans for how they will recover nature in their area. This is me in my role. As I said, I lead on our strategy for health and the environment, a big role in terms of joining up the understanding around environmental benefits, health and well-being, but also trying to turn that into some practical delivery priorities. So we have 12 area teams, and each of those area teams now have a lead for health and the environment, and we're actually going to be increasing that resource this year based on additional demand really for our input and our ability to help build those partnerships between the health sector and sort of more environmental sector. And these are my various profile pictures that I use depending on who I'm talking to. So I think that's that for me just shows the breadth in the role, which is amazing, and is actually very sort of inspiring. Other places I get to go to, but also the people I get to meet, and sometimes have to wear a shirt and tie still. So I'm going to talk very briefly around, I suppose, the first element of our work around health and the environment. So that is growing green social prescribing, looking at how we can use green social prescribing as a way to address health inequalities. So we've worked with partners in, you see the on screen there, range from the NHS to MHCLG, which I realise this is a slide that needs updating because they're now DLUC. So partners across government, nationally and locally, looking at how we can mainstream green social prescribing. So we're part of the Shared Outcomes Fund funded project, which is a £5.7 million project looking at how we can mainstream green social prescribing. But more than that, I think there's a role that green social prescribing plays at the moment, and how it grows is going to be really critical in terms of how we address health inequalities, and that's something that's really driving the NHS and the health sector's interest in this. But alongside that, for us, there's a critical piece of thinking around how it addresses inequalities in access to green space, access to nature. So of course we can't take part in green social prescribing activities if there isn't anything locally that we can engage with in the natural world. So I suppose the other element that we're working on is actually how we can join up potentially at a spatial level, at a policy level, the links between nature recovery and healthcare planning. So green infrastructure is a big part of this. Our work on the green infrastructure standards is really driving a lot of relationships across government and nationally and locally and with the health sector. So we're looking at standards for urban areas, which will drive urban greening, look at things like woodland canopy cover, accessible natural green space standards, etc. And then also look at how we can use this mapping. So the picture on the right is a very crude example of the open data mapping platform that we've got through the green infrastructure standards. So we're working with leaders in public health to look at what health data should be included into that open source mapping information. So it's been really great the past few months to talk with a lot of leaders in the healthcare world to talk about actually how understanding your local area and the level of accessible green space you have links to your health outcomes and potentially target populations. So I think that's really opening a lot of doors and giving a really practical tool actually of how a strategy around nature recovery or green space can be integrated with population healthcare plans and other pieces. And the other thing that the standards are doing is actually looking at what quality green space looks like, and that's really important. As I said earlier, that one piece of all green space is not created equal. The quality of that green space is important, but equally we know that the perception of that quality is equally important in terms of whether people will engage with that green space. So something that we might say is brilliantly biodiverse, it's got lots of a mosaic of habitats, might actually be seen by a local community as somewhere which is maybe even perceived as unsafe for them to access if they feel that there are not clear lighting or not clear paths and routes through those spaces. So I think particularly in an urban area, those partnerships and bringing people together is even more important. And the other sort of emerging theme I think I want to just talk through is that role of nature connection. It's really growing in our thinking, wanting to understand the role that nature connection has in terms of positive health outcomes, but also pro-environmental behaviours. I think the link to pro-environmental behaviours is one that government would be really interested in understanding, and has a lot of potential to leverage in some interest. But it's not something that I think we feel secure enough at the moment to say there is a direct link between nature connection and pro-environmental behaviours. So it's really interesting how that can grow and develop, and also how we start to measure it, how we can embed it in legislation and targets and KPIs, etc. So underpinning all of this work is we are an evidence-led organisation. A few pieces just to pick out, I'm sure most people are aware of, but our People and Nature survey and our recently launched Children's People and Nature survey has been really beneficial, looking at trends during the pandemic of use of green space. And actually, I think that data source has been really helpful, and I've had discussions with the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, for instance, they're talking about the pandemic having a negative impact in activity levels and use of facilities and leisure facilities. And actually, we've been able to talk to them about, actually, we've seen a massive increase in the use of parks and green spaces for physical activities. So I think we're trying to think about ways to bring in, demonstrate that wider benefit of urban green spaces for health benefits, but might actually, we're talking the right language when we talk to DCMS and others about that. We're not just speaking to the Department of Health. A couple of other things we're looking at on the evidence side is on the bottom of this slide. This is one of our what we call it relevant factor diagrams as part of a project we're doing, looking at building health, well-being, nature and sustainability tool. So this is trying to create these sort of dashboards and I suppose logic or relevant factor diagrams, working with leaders in local authorities and decision makers to demonstrate how these four elements of health, well-being, nature and sustainability can come together in their decision making. And the final thing in this area is something that we started to work on, which is actually looking at the evaluation of interventions. So across government, a number of government departments will be talking about the health benefits of their policies. They are all being measured in slightly different ways, and data is being collected in slightly different ways. And so we're working with the Department of Health and OHID actually to look at how we can bring that together. And this work we're doing has got a particular focus on policies that engage people with nature or encourage people to spend time outside, so that we really understand what the interventions are that work, how they can be, I suppose, quantified, and how that data can be shared across government to drive sort of better integrated policy and delivery. So last couple of slides, and this is sort of, this is what my head feels like quite a lot of the time, if I'm honest. I'm sure others do as well. So there's a massive challenge about bringing all this together. So I think we work quite regularly across government, and at the moment we've got a massive mesh of threads which relate to the Department of Health's forthcoming mental health strategy, the levelling up missions on physical and mental health, but also on things like Pride in Place. Also opportunities such as the government's health promotion task force, and potential to use that as a way to explore better connection with nature for health and well-being. DCMS's sports strategy I've already mentioned, and things more sort of practical delivery elements such as the NHS long-term plan and integrated care system structures. So there's a real challenge of bringing all this together. But I think if we have that opportunity to create these just amazing, thriving natural spaces, which have so many multiple benefits to people. We've got a specific strand of work that we're really excited about, actually looking at the urban landscape as part of a new urban landscape approach. So building on the Glover review, we're looking at whether there is a new type of accreditation, potentially sort of a green cities approach that will recognise that sort of community and partnership working that will transform cities, towns and neighbourhoods into much more greener and nature-rich, healthier spaces to live. So that's really something I think which is something that, I get quite excited thinking about it, but it's sometimes quite hard to pin down and actually quantify what we mean. The idea of a green community hub, I think, really, or any hub, but a hub which is also incorporates nature recovery and biodiversity and people's health and well-being, just has that potential to really transform local neighbourhoods. And I think particularly post-pandemic, in the way that people are working much more flexibly, what that will mean for urban centres in particular is something which I think warrants further sort of exploration. And my final sort of content slide really is this one, whereby I talked at the beginning of the fact that we're building partnerships for nature's recovery and partnerships to connect more people with nature for health and well-being. And we are engaging much more broadly with people from different backgrounds and communities. So we had a piece of work that was published earlier this year, which was actually about nature visuals and that diversity of images in how we portray our natural green spaces. Because as we talk more and more about the urban agenda, our Natural England's imagery is normally about big vistas and the Lake District, or a national nature reserve, and it's just not relevant to lots of people that we want to be engaging in this agenda. So this is a tool, sort of a resource that can have a look at and use, gives some good sort of ideas about how actually we can build more engaging visuals into our work as part of our sort of engagement work. So a lot going on, and a couple of contact pieces there for me. The Together in Nature Twitter handle is our own Connected People with Nature one for our team, and then the General Natural England one there is there as well. Yeah, really happy to just take any questions now, or if there's more detailed work you want to talk through with me, please get in contact.
Great, thanks Dave. Thanks so much for sharing that vision with us and that big challenge. We've certainly got a lot of strands to pull together of action and policy there, haven't we? We're just out of time here in this bit for questions, but perhaps we can pick up questions when we come to the panel after our project update. So if anyone does have questions, please do put them in the chat and we'll come back to Dave then. But I'm going to pass at this point to Joe, who's going to chair our project update session. Over to you, Joe.
Great, thank you very much, and thanks very much everyone for being here. So I am going to, with no further ado, hand over to Michelle, who looks like, I can read in her eyes, I'm trying to share the slides right now. So we've done lots of practice slide sharing. I'll be a filler for you, but we've done lots of practice slide sharing, so this is going to be incredibly smooth. They are going to pop up any second now. Ta-da! So I am going to keep you guys to time. So please kick off. It's great to have you as our first one.
Thank you. I'll just go full screen. There we go. Okay, so hello everyone. Very lovely to meet with the network again and be presenting today on our project, which was made possible with the funding from Quench. So today I'm just going to be presenting the background to our project, why do we dig gardens, and give a brief update on project progress. So we have a wonderful interdisciplinary team working on this project, so I'll just quickly sing their praises. So I'm Michelle Tester-Jones, I'm the PI on the project. I'm an environmental psychologist and have a background in quantitative research and particular interest in studying experiences of nature for individuals suffering from depression and anxiety. Dr. Matt Cottam is our practitioner. He's the business development manager for the Conservation Volunteers organisation, who is our project partner. Dr. Cottam brings over 30 years experience of working as a practitioner for governments and NGO environmental bodies. Dr. Annabel Edwards is our qualitative researcher with a particular expertise in therapeutic landscapes, and Dr. Kirsty Ashworth is our environmental scientist with expertise in environmental monitoring and assessment. We've also just taken on an RA to support the project, Andy Harrod. He's in fact worked with the Green Gyms before, I'm going to be talking about, so he's a perfect fit to join the team. Okay, so a bit of background then. We know that spending time in nature can prevent the onset of common mental health problems such as depression and anxiety. There's also increasing evidence that small-scale green care and green prescription programmes can be effective. However, very little is known about exactly how these interventions are successful, i.e. the mechanisms, or what factors may impact on their relative success or failure. Specifically to our knowledge, there's no research exploring how the effectiveness of green or nature programmes or interventions for mental health vary with environmental quality and how nature connectedness plays a role in this relationship. And our project aims to specifically explore the sensory quality of the intervention environment in this context. So our environment can affect the way we feel and behave and holds potential to facilitate psychological and physical interaction. So we hypothesise that some settings could be more conducive to facilitating symptom improvement compared to others. An example could be sites near busy roads or exposed to other urban noises versus more rural ones, or ones with a specific colour palette or optimum temperature or smells. So we want to know, could these qualities facilitate greater or lesser connection to nature and subsequently impact on the intervention outcomes? In support of this hypothesis, it has been demonstrated that outcomes of therapeutic intervention can be affected by indoor physical environments, factors such as sound. We're exploring these questions using the conservation volunteers organisation Green Gym sites. So green gyms are individually tailored, challenging physical work outdoors in a social setting, and they combine constructive outdoor activity, environmental improvement and community food growing in a safe, welcoming social setting. And we're working with 3 green gyms for this project located in Ellesmere-Port and Chester. And we have 4 research questions summarised by the moderated mediation model on slide now. So does engaging in the green gym on a weekly basis for at least 8 weeks improve general wellbeing scores? And does connectedness with nature mediate this relationship? And then does sensory environmental quality moderate the relationship between green gym activities and nature connectedness, which in turn leads to those improved wellbeing outcomes? So this is the moderated mediation bit. And if so, are some qualities more important than others in predicting positive outcomes? And finally, we're also interested in the role of perceived safety as a subjective aspect of environmental quality in that relationship between participating in the green gym and wellbeing outcomes. Now, I do grant you this is a complicated model that would ideally require a larger sample size than we have scope to recruit for this particular project. However, I'm hoping we'll be able to recruit enough participants to demonstrate the direct pathways and the 2 separate mediation and moderation models, if perhaps not the full model. And I think this will be an achievement in a time frame. I'm also musing the possibility of bootstrapping to allow us to test the full model, which again I think would be useful to do to support the proof of concept here. So since the funding was awarded, we've had to adapt our design slightly. So TCB, the conservation volunteers, were due to open 2 new green gym sites, which would give us access to brand new members that we could then follow over the course of 8 to 12 weeks. But these sites didn't open in time for this project, and this has impacted our ability to recruit new members and take pre and post measurements. So this study is now a retrospective quasi-experimental design in which we're aiming to recruit 65 existing members across 3 established green gym sites. And these participants will have reported experiencing low perceived wellbeing when they first joined the green gym. We will then compare members' wellbeing scores on first joining, which was collected by TCB as part of the joining process, to their present score, which we'll obtain via a questionnaire after having attended at least 8 sessions on a regular basis. And we do recognise this presents some methodological issues, particularly around potential confounders like length of time that they've been a member, level of engagement, other therapies or treatments received in the interim, and so on. But we are controlling for as much of this as possible with our questionnaire, and we've just tried to achieve as close to the original proposal as possible, given the unexpected challenges that were presented to the design. Around 30% of participants that attend green gym, members that attend green gym, report lower wellbeing or symptoms of depression, anxiety. So we do anticipate being able to successfully recruit to the project using these sites, and we're going to record on our key outcomes using well-established and validated measures of wellbeing and nature connectedness. We'll also measure a number of socio-demographic indicators that have been found to have been associated with nature visits and or mental health in previous research. We're going to be doing ethnographic observations as well of 2 of the sites and interviews with 5 to 10 participants throughout the data collection period to allow us to get some of that richer data on perceived environmental quality and experience of attending the green gyms. And finally, we'll have our site assessments for sensory environmental quality, and this will include soundscapes, air samples, temperature and visual qualities such as colour, sightlines and canopy density. And I've just included here some of the examples of nature connectedness. We've got the nature in self scale, the Venn diagram, and some items from the Menet questionnaire as well. So we've made good progress so far, and we're on track to hopefully start data collection as planned in early July. We're waiting on final approval from ethics, which we are very much hoping to have next week now, following some requested revisions from the committee. And we, as I said, we've recruited our highly recommended RA to support the data collection, who's worked with the green gyms before. So we're very lucky to have him on board, and we're just waiting on the paperwork, we're ordering our equipment and so on. And we're planning to have an in-person get together in early July on site, which would be lovely, because we'll be first meeting in person then, which would be really nice. Okay, all done. Thank you very much, Jess. I will leave it there. Thanks everyone for listening. Can I just say I'm really sorry, but I'm going to have to, I'll have to leave just as the QA starts. So if anybody's got any questions, do feel free to forward them to me via email, or Annabelle Edwards is here and she may be able to answer some of those questions for you. Thank you, everyone.
Brilliant. That was very well timed. Thank you very much. Yeah, please, because we'll do the Q&A after the 3. So please put questions in the chat. And when you put them in the chat, a lot of people have already done this, but tell us who your question is for, because when we come to the Q&A, we won't necessarily be able to link to which one it's for. So I'm hoping, I can't see Beth at the moment. She might not be on my screen. I'm hoping I could also read in her eyes her attempt to share her slides. Yeah, look at that. This is the power of the mind. Thank you very much, Beth. I'm going to restart my stopwatch. Over to you.
Great, thanks very much, everyone. So I'm representing the Environmental Quality Inequalities team. I have to say these slides were all put together by a wonderful PI, Kirsty, who's unfortunately not able to join today. So I'll do my best to present them and present kind of the progress of the project so far. And so really our main question is around what influences a person's sense of place. And specifically, we're interested in how environmental and ecosystem qualities of urban blue-green spaces and also the biopsychosocial spiritual life courses of local residents interact together, and what are the impacts of those interactions, which we appreciate will be very complex, on people's perceptions and experiences of both accessing and using these public urban blue-green spaces. And so in our pilot study, we're aiming to explore the following questions. So what are the specific physical, environmental and biopsychosocial spiritual factors that influence inequalities in access to urban blue-green space? And then how do those factors affect a person's sense of place and how they feel in that environment? And how does this differ across different demographic groups as well? And so this is the team, and we're quite keen to emphasize that although we all have our own kind of specialisms, most of us are kind of working interdisciplinary already, and now we're trying to kind of combine all of those interdisciplinary experiences within this project. So Kirsty is the PI based at Lancaster, and she has a background in atmospheric sciences. I'm an ecologist who predominantly works on pollinators, but I also have some experience in community outreach in a national park setting through a previous role, doing that kind of work outside of academia. Laura works at Hutton and she has background in environment and architecture. Nadine is a practitioner, but also an academic as well, so with experience in ecology and nature connectedness. And Danielle has experience in biomonitoring, such as heart rate monitoring. And Emma works for Eden Project North, and she has been really instrumental in kind of providing the place setting for our project, that being Morecambe and Lancaster, and helping to connect us with local communities who we hope will take part in our project. And so we really don't kind of distinguish between practitioners and academics. We all play a very equal role in the project and project decisions so far. And so in terms of methodology, we're using feelings mapping. So we have a large touch table provided by Hutton, which we've used to, or we will be using to identify local spaces that are important to our communities. So taking a very kind of bottom-up approach and asking participants to identify local spaces and the feelings that they associate when they spend time in those spaces, or perhaps they're spaces that they might avoid, and telling us why they might avoid those spaces. And at the same time, we're collecting data on kind of usage and demographics as well. And so connected to that are our kind of qualitative methods. So qualitative data is being collected through the mapping, but we also plan to do surveys and site visits with a smaller number of participants. We're using a form of biomonitoring, so heart rate variability, so similar to what kind of your Fitbit or something, if you have one, is recording. So it's a non-invasive measure of a biological response to a certain environment or place. And then in terms of ecological monitoring of those spaces that are identified through the feelings map, we'll be conducting botanical transects and pollinator counts, and also measuring bird song as well. And we'll also be monitoring environmental factors, particularly relating to kind of sensory experience in those places. So colour, light, soundscapes and scents, for example. And so our approach takes a couple of phases. So we're in phase 1 at the moment, and this is the feelings mapping. So we're using an interactive digital map that can be presented on a large kind of touch table, so a giant iPad, but it could also be accessed through people's phones or some smaller iPads as well. And so we're asking people to kind of center themselves on the map and then search around and find some places on that map within the kind of Morecambe, Lancaster area that they do or don't visit, and to report the kind of feelings that are invoked by spending time in those places. And then we'll also have a short survey that collects demographic information about participants, as well as their willingness to participate in further kind of more in-depth follow-up studies as well. And so we have already completed one event that took part at Rita's Cafe and another cafe up in Morecambe, and this was organised in conjunction with Eden Project North through Emma, who promoted the event through kind of their networks of local communities, and participation was pretty good. And then the next plan is to attend the Bay Health Festival in Lancaster, which has kind of a very wide demographic spread and should have quite a lot of people attending. So the whole team will be going up to attend. As I say, we've already held our first event last week, and this is just some very light example data. So showing kind of some of the hotspots that are emerging already from the feelings mapping, which is encouraging. And this is just an example of some of the example feelings that we gave people to kind of input, but also they were able to add their own terms as well. So you can see we've got kind of a spread of some perhaps more positive feelings, relaxed, peaceful, and then some more negative feelings such as sad or tense. And our demographic spread in terms of age is also plotted below, and not too bad. But yeah, we only got this data last week, so I guess we're still digging into that at the moment. And then once we've completed those 2 in-person events, we'll be looking at the maps to identify some case study locations based on the kind of clustering of positive or negative feelings from the map. And we hope to contrast either kind of very different kind of spaces or different feelings that are invoked, or perhaps if there's some obvious differences between demographic groups in terms of where people prefer to spend time or don't wish to spend time. So it's a very kind of bottom-up participant led approach in that sense. And then once we've decided on our case study locations, the team will visit and design a feelings tour, which I'm going to explain now. So this will be a mapped route that will ask a subset of participants to walk. And
30 seconds, Beth, okay?
Oh, sorry. So it'll be self-led, and people will respond to prompts and share their physical environment and their feelings, and we'll also be monitoring their heart rate. We'll monitor the environmental measures at those sites as well, and then we'll be overlaying that data and looking for correlations between environmental quality, places that people are accessing and their perceptions of those places, and exploring differences between demographic groups. And so we hope to disseminate this data through some conferences, and obviously also work together to kind of scale this up across locations and develop some funding proposals. So sorry for taking up too much time, but welcome any questions, comments or suggestions. And if anyone wants to join in with the full project, we'd love to hear from you as well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Sorry to be so mean, but we've
No,
got lots to get through. So I'm not sure which of the next team are who's to. Oh, excellent, the slides appearing. So yeah, thanks again to that previous team. Really great to talk through already, lots to live up to. And I just want to make it clear to this final team that just because you've got 3 speakers doesn't mean you've got 3 times 8 minutes. So I'm going to be timing you too. So great, can I hand it over?
Yeah, no problem, thanks. Hi everyone, my name's John. I work at the charity called Groundwork. I'm going to kind of lead you through the first part of this presentation. So the question that we are looking to answer is around the difference in ecosystem quality and the impact that that has on nature connectedness and health within a specific population group, and that population group being young people in a disadvantaged area. And this is the area that we're talking about, so apologies for the quality of this map. The area that we're looking at is St Helens, which is a town of around 100,000 people. For those that don't know their Northwest history, St Helens was a rapidly developing town in the Industrial Revolution. Massive amount of coal mining, massive amount of glass making, and the St Helens Canal was developed as part of that Industrial Revolution that runs through there. Since the kind of mid-19th century, we've seen huge amounts of heavy industry close, and over recent decades, kind of significant decline within St Helens itself. Our area of research is around the Sankey Valley corridor. So you can see that just if you look at the right of the map there that says M62, that's the motorway junction. We're looking at that stretch running into St Helens town centre. The canal along there was a critical trade route, but now it's become partially unnavigable. But more interestingly, ecosystem quality along that route varies massively. So during our research, we're going to be working with 128 young people from St Helens and the surrounding area. These young people have been recruited already as part of a wider groundwork programme called NCS. This is a 2-week personal development and social action project, and it's the 4th year that we've been running this in St Helens. Groundwork lead on the wider programme, but we're specifically going to be working with young people over a number of days around nature and their connectedness with nature. These 128 participants are going to be split into 4 different groups, and they're going to be working with us over 4 different weeks from the end of July right the way through to the middle of August. Through their time with us, the young people will undertake identical activities, including conservation tasks, biodiversity monitoring, mindful connection with nature, and photography. The only controllable difference will be that groups 1 and 2 will undertake these activities in an environment with poor ecosystem quality, and groups 3 and 4 will undertake these activities in spaces with high ecosystem quality. To assess ecosystem quality across Sankey Valley corridor, we've used a tool that was developed in New Zealand by Catherine Hand. So this method scores urban habitats at a fine scale. It provides a single comparable score that represents the capacity of habitats to support biodiversity and people's connection to that biodiversity. So there are 3 different components within this method. The first one is species richness. So that covers the 3 main taxonomy groups used in most ecological studies, so birds, plants, and invertebrates. And it's measured using a rapid morphospecies approach. The second is looking at structural richness. So the structural variation is measured in both vertical complexity and horizontal complexity. And the third, which is more of a qualitative assessment, is looking at wildness. So that's looking at artificial landscape improvements, looking at exotic species dominating spaces, and it will generally look at 3 elements of wildness. So the greenness of the space, the naturalness of the space, and the degree of management of that space. So these components will all be combined together to score a single bio score, and that's what's been used to select the 4 different sites, 2 of which are deemed to be high ecosystem quality and 2 deemed to be low ecosystem quality. So I'll pass over to Mike, who's going to talk you through the data that we're going to be collecting from the young people as part of the programme.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I'm Michael Lomas. I'm an environmental psychologist based at the University of Salford. I'm just going to talk you through some of the specific methods. Now, the quantitative element of the project is basically a kind of test of concept as to whether we can use these particular measures we've chosen to engage in this kind of experimental research. So what we're particularly interested in, because as John points out, we're allocating the the participants to these particular groups, specifically being allocated to either a high or low ecosystem quality, we're looking at whether the fairly well-established positive impacts of nature may be mediated by the ecosystem quality of that nature to which they are being exposed. So they're all engaging in these activities in different groups. And we're basically going to apply pre and post measures of depression and anxiety with the DAS-21, their connectedness to nature with the illustrated inclusion of nature in self-scale, which is a single item scale, as well as general well-being with the use of the WHO5. And we've basically built these surveys on online surveys, and as part of the activities that John is engaging with groundwork, at the Keep Warm kind of initial meeting of them, they'll complete this on either their smartphones or via an iPad that we'll make available to them. And then we'll do this again following. So we have the pre and post measures. So we're basically through mixed measures analysis, we're going to be able to look at the before and after and control for that mediating impact of ecosystem quality. We're also concerned with physical activity. In order to do this, the sample will wear an accelerometer for 2 48-hour periods. Firstly, 2 weeks before the activity takes place, and then during the activity itself. And the reason we're doing 48 hours is because we're obviously concerned with physical activity, not just within the activities which they're engaging with groundwork. We want to get an essence of whether there is a residual kind of impact, whether having engaged in this activity with nature, do we get that kind of spillover effect into their life after they go home and engage with their personal lives. So that's the quantitative element. And then can I have the next slide, please, John? And then we also have, go ahead, sorry.
Oh,
go on.
Can you hear me okay, or do you want to do it?
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize you arrived. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I made it on time, but I'm on my phone. But yeah, sorry, the qualitative data collection, we are using photo voice. So we felt that was a really good method to engage with this particular demographic of young people, because they are quite used to kind of taking photographs and sharing their photographs. So the main things that we get from this is we'll ask them to take photographs of particular places, and we get an understanding of what places and qualities they do like and dislike. But furthermore, we'll then have focus groups with the participants, and that gives us a better qualitative understanding of why they like or dislike them. So I've got the dog now. We're using the biopsychosocial physical model as well as a framework.
Sorry, 30 seconds.
Okay, sorry, yeah, as a framework. So some of them to get a better understanding and ensure that we have a mixture of all different feelings. And this will be with a subset, not the full 120. It'll be an optional task for people who want to be involved.
Brill. Thank you very much. That was great. And especially the addition of the dog. So we are now on to questions and answers. Can we go for, do people want to put hands up? We haven't got much time for this, so I'm going to try and take one question from each team, for each team. Does someone want to put a hand up? Can't see any hands. Okay, we have a bunch of questions in the thing. Michelle, you're still here at the moment. What will the air samples be analysed for, and have you considered how sensory qualities might be related back to ecosystem functioning in 30 seconds?
Oh, so they will be monitored for volatile content or volatiles, but that's not my area of expertise, and Kirsty is unfortunately not here to talk about it a bit more. But I did have just a quick chat with Jess, and she mentioned it might be linked to plant communities. So that's something I'm going to talk to Kirsty about and see if that's something that we can incorporate at all. So I will do that.
And we have a question for Dave in the chat. Does your work tackling mental ill health through green social prescribing also take into account those people with the most severe mental health illness?
Yes, hi. So it can do. I suppose the cross-government pilot that's been launched is not primarily focused on those with the most severe mental health challenges. There is a broad spectrum, I think, of green social prescribing and routes that people might access them. So that's one of the things we're really looking at actually is where do people access green social prescribing from? So there is I suppose a GP-led, medical-led sort of routes, but there's also quite a high number of people that self-refer to green social prescribing activities, and they might not even see them as green social prescribing activities. It could be sort of managed walks. So it's quite a mixed economy, if that's the right phrase, that we're talking about there. I think it is a worry of some green social providers that they will have have referrals to them that they can't manage, but some are really geared up to that and have the plans and the processes in process, and a lot comes through working in partnerships with commissioners, NHS commissioners, because ultimately the NHS leads won't be referring people if they don't think the provision is suitable for them.
Thank you. We have a question for the young people team. Sounds like a really great intense data collection period. What would be the ideal follow-up project that could build on Groundwork's initiative?
I'll take this one. Yeah, I mean, how much money have you got would be the question back. What we'd really like to do is, there are a number of initiatives that John's already involved in, such as developing the sites, etc. And that would be really cool to monitor how that progresses, and perhaps even achieve some level of status for the site and therefore for the people around it. But also the huge potential here is to develop an intervention off the back of the research that we're doing here, and perhaps develop an intervention that will increase nature connectedness, assuming that we all find positive results in our various projects as we move forward.
Thank you. Another question for Dave. What would be the dream but of evidence or collaboration that you might hope comes from this network that would help you deliver Natural England's vision on green social prescribing and health inequalities?
Yeah, well, I was just starting to type, but the response to that would be a lot easier to talk through, I think. Yeah, so I think integration's a key thing for me, is actually understanding where the links are. You know, we talk often about, you know, if you think about it at a very hyperlocal level, a piece of natural green space provides multiple benefits to multiple different people and talks to multiple different funding sources and government priorities. So actually how we can map all those, and actually how that's already happening in places. I think we have a few examples. I talk quite a lot, you know, internally. You know, I've got loads of examples of green social prescribing where that's happening. What I haven't got are the examples to say, you know, because we've been able to demonstrate the health benefits of this space, we've been able to bring in XYZ investments and build a sustainable long-term sort of, you know, commitment to this space, improving the quality of that space, or even creating more green space close by. I think the ultimate goal, you know, is that you know, we value and create more green space because we understand the benefits that provides to society, you know, around health, around all of the sorts of pieces. So I think that connection, integration is really the key, and practical examples are always so helpful.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, we are extremely hard taskmasters, so we are about to give you a 4-minute break. So not time for a cup of tea, only time for a drink of water and a biological break of other needs, and we will see you back here at 8 minutes past 3. Thank you very much for joining us for the first half. See you in a few minutes.
Great, welcome back everyone. So it is 8 minutes past 3 exactly, so we are going to start again as we are on a tight schedule today. So we're going to continue now with the updates from our Quench funded projects. So the next project we're going to hear about is EquiFood, and we have Beth Mead, who is going to present, already sharing her slides, very organised. So you've got 8 minutes, Beth, and I will let you know when you've got a minute to go, and I'll start the time now. Thank you.
Great, thank you. If you can't hear me, please give me a wave. I think I've managed to unmute properly. But hi, I'm Beth. I'm from the Psychology Department at the University of Liverpool. I'm one of the co-investigators of EquiFood, and we are looking at environmental quality impact on urban food growing for better health and well-being. We're led by Felicity Crotty, soil scientist at Royal Agricultural University, and our practitioner is Louise Nielsen, a programme manager at BIC Innovation. We also have Rachel Clark, an expert in human human-computer data science interactions from Newcastle University, and we have a research assistant from BIC Innovation, Chloe Mellor, with us. Oh, sorry, my slides aren't. Okay, there we go. So how did we get here? So we started off with our understanding and our awareness through our different disciplines that urban food growing has been identified as beneficial for physical and mental health, diet, sustainability, and the environment. And recent research shows that the UK has ample potential to achieve this. So within our urban areas in the UK, if we were to use them for food growing, we'd be able to produce up to 8 times what we produce domestically at the moment. And research also suggests that in some situations, yields of food from urban food growing could be higher than those from conventional farming. At the same time as this, we also see some research suggesting that there's greater soil carbon in urban areas, which has led to sensationalising headlines about there being, for example, only 100 harvests left in UK soils. So it's questions like this that lead us to the suggestion that we need to start looking at urban soils, for example. In terms of urban soils, we also need to consider the differences between ground level growing and rooftop growing. When we look at urban food growing in general and looking at people's perceptions of it in terms of the consumer, we tend to see a bit of a concern around the safety features around of food grown in urban areas because of the potential for contamination or pollution. So what we want to do is look at this in urban areas, but also be able to compare roof versus ground level growing, because these are two key and highly developed areas of urban farming or urban agriculture, but nobody's actually done this comparison yet. So this is what we're doing in EquiFood. So we're a unique interdisciplinary team of researchers, and we're working together to focus on these 3 research questions. Namely, how do we simply measure the quality of soil and water in urban ecosystems? How do we compare the perceived quality of soil over measured quality? And how does an understanding of soil quality relate to nature connectedness and benefits to health and well-being? We're doing this through 3 interconnected work packages, which are with a 4th at the end, which I'll talk you through now. So work package 1, which is already underway, is our soil quality assessment. So we're conducting a systematic literature review and an experimental measurement of soil quality at rooftop or vertical growing spaces and ground-based growing spaces. So this is where we're looking at the quality of soils used for food growing at different sites throughout the UK and urban areas. I'll talk a little bit more about the sites we already have signed up, but we're always looking for more. So if you do know of any rooftop spaces we can access, please do let us know. And then work package 2 is our citizen science programme. So we're working with 120 urban dwelling participants who are either novice food growers or experienced food growers, and we're working to assess the results and feasibility of providing these growers with a kit that allows them to simply self-assess and report measures of soil quality at, for example, their allotment site or their home garden for food growing. We're about to start recruiting, or we've just started recruiting for this, and all of our participants are going to be provided with a kit, which you can see in the bottom middle photograph here. And this will be a kit that gives them the tools to conduct their own soil monitoring project at home. So our participants will grow borage, which is a pollinator, edible herb with some health benefits and a very good indicator of soil quality. So we're going to grow borage at home or their allotment site for 12 weeks. They're also going to use our app, which Rachel at Newcastle has developed, to report on soil quality on a fortnightly basis. We're going to ask them to bury cotton strips within their soil as well, so we can then dig them up after 12 weeks to look at degradation as a measure of soil quality. And we're going to ask them to provide us with soil samples at the start and end of the 12-week period, so we can analyse the soil quality for heavy metal contamination. Nested within work package 2 is work package 3. So this is where we're looking at the health and wellbeing impact of taking part in our soil monitoring project. So we'll be using validated psychometric assessments to measure how engaging with nature via ecosystem quality assessment, so work package 2, impacts on people's nature connection, health and wellbeing. So we're doing this through asking our 120 participants to complete questionnaires at the start and end of that 12-week monitoring period. And then last but not least, we have work package 4, which is our synthesis and evaluation work package. So at this point, at the end of the study, we're going to evaluate the feasibility of this methodological approach, the work packages 1 to 3, to determine its use in scaling approach in a larger scale study of urban rooftop growing. So Louise at BIC Innovation, our practitioner, is involved with the development of potential rooftop farm in Cardiff. So the idea is that the things we're going to learn from EquiFood will be applicable to the development of that, and also other urban growing sites through our wider practitioner stakeholder network. Our plan is to be able to disseminate our findings through these networks, through the QUENCH network, but also through a policy note, a paper, and we also have an active website that we'll be sharing our results on. In terms of progress, so where we're up to at the moment, as I've mentioned, our website is live now, so please do go and check us out. We've got information about the project there. We've got a blog that we've started populating. Our email address is also live. We have some sites secured for work package 1, the soil assessment sites, and we're about to start with this. So we have rooftop and ground sites at the University of Liverpool, Cirencester Cathedral, a community garden in Liverpool, St David's Shopping Centre in Cardiff, and an area of Pontypool. We've just in the last couple of days been granted ethical approval for work packages 2 and 3. So this is a citizen science project that's about to kick off. We've literally launched recruitment today. So this one, we don't have any results yet, but we're on the way to getting those. And the app that we've developed for our participants to be able to report to is live and ready to go. If anybody's interested, we're using QR codes. You can scan our QR code. It'll take you to the part of our website where you can find out more about the project. And this is the sort of participant-facing thing we're using for recruitment. And Felicity has also presented the study as a poster at the British Ecological Society conference. So we're making good progress and hopefully we'll have some more data soon. But that's everything from me. If anyone has any questions, please do let me know. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Beth, for your excellent timing and really exciting to hear about the progress on EquiFood. So if you have questions for the presenters, please put them in the chat and please just start your question with who the question is directed to. So our final project update comes from the Designs for Connection project. And I believe Miranda Bain is going to present on behalf of this project. So great, Miranda, we can see your slides there. So whenever you're ready, take it away.
Thank you. Hi everyone, and it's really nice to be here to tell you about our project Designed for Connection. First of all, I'm just going to briefly introduce you to the team. We're wonderfully interdisciplinary, as all the teams here are. We've got expertise in pollination, in citizen science, psychology, nature connection, stakeholder engagement, and practical conservation as well. So a real mix. The project Designed for Connection is all about citizen science and how citizen science can be used and harnessed to improve the nature connection of participants. And specifically, we want to know how does the project design and the environmental quality in which a participant undertakes citizen science impact the outcomes. So for anyone who's not familiar, citizen science is the volunteer engagement of the general public in the scientific process. And this can be through the design of projects, analysis of data, but most typically is data collection. And citizen science isn't limited to any particular scientific discipline, but for our work, we're focusing on pollinator citizen science. There's been a big increase in pollinator citizen science projects globally in recent years, and this is because of concerns about insect declines, and also because citizen science is a really efficient way to collect lots of data on insect distribution and abundance. So we're basing our citizen science project on 2 existing projects. The first is the Every Flower Counts project developed by Plant Life, and this involves counting the number of flowers in a square on your lawn, and from that they can calculate the sort of amount of nectar that's available for insects to feed on. And then the second is the Fit Counts project, which is a timed insect count. This is developed by the UK Pollinator Monitoring Scheme and is one of the big national schemes for monitoring insects. So our citizen science activity takes the core concepts from those 2 different projects. We have the first part, the first task, which is a flower count within our quadrat, and then the second task, which is a timed insect count. So our first iteration of this design is based very much on the traditional citizen science approach. So it's thinking about making the project really efficient and reliable for good data collection. But what we then did is we took that and we rebuilt it as a pathways informed citizen science project. So this is thinking about enhancing the experience for the participant, and particularly thinking about bringing in the senses to create emotion, meaning, compassion, and an appreciation of beauty whilst you're doing this activity. So the participant still collects exactly the same data, but the instructions and the process is really focused around their experience rather than just the scientific task at hand. So our overall research design is that our citizen science volunteers are presented with one of the versions of this project, a traditional citizen science activity or the pathways informed version, and then they're tasked with carrying out this activity in either an area of high environmental quality or low environmental quality. And the participants are blind to what combination they're doing. We're just asking them to do it for us. And at the end of the activity, we give them an evaluation questionnaire where we ask them about their experience. And from that, we collect two data sets. So the actual citizen science data on the pollinators and the plants, and the nature connection data and how the participant found the activity. We're looking to recruit a minimum of 60 participants for this, and we're looking in two areas. So firstly, in Cumbria, where we're working with the Cumbria Wildlife Trust. This ties in with a project that they're doing called Planting for Pollinators, where they're restoring areas specifically to enhance them for pollinators. And then we're also doing this in the city of Glasgow, where I'm based. And in both these two areas, although they are incredibly different, they're both areas where we do have high levels of deprivation. And what we expect is that a lot of those people, therefore, will have lower nature connection. And so this is an activity that could really benefit them. So far, we have made some good progress. So we've designed our project. We've tested the method to check that it works, and we've actually begun our data collection. And so far we've had 20 participants do the project. I was actually out this morning collecting data with a community group in the city, and they all seem to be really enjoying it despite the Scottish weather. So that was really nice. And thinking about the bigger impact of this, well, we do know that citizen science can increase nature connection. But really what we want to focus on here is having intentional design to really enhance that nature connection and make it as good as possible for the people participating. And we see this as having kind of three core benefits. Firstly, for people to increase their well-being, and here we want to target people who are most nature deprived. To have benefits for nature as people increase pro-nature behaviours through this experience, and benefits for science because this allows us to collect citizen science data in areas that are typically undersampled. And so I'll just leave you with the summary slide, and thank you very much for listening, and look forward to your questions.
That was great, Miranda. Thank you so much for that really nice presentation. It's great to hear about so much progress on the project. And again, that was absolutely perfectly timed, which is really helpful. So we've got some time now for questions. Predominantly for our last two presenters, but if you have any other questions for other speakers, feel free to pop those in the chat. So just looking through just now, I can see there's been quite a lot of discussion about sites for equi-food, which is really exciting. It looks like you've made some good connections there with quite a few folks. So I'll let you guys follow up on those where needed. So I'm going to ask a question then to Miranda. So really interesting to sort of hear about some of the effects you're predicting of well-being and nature and pro-environmental behaviour. And I think it really links well to what Dave said earlier in his Natural England presentation about this link between nature connection and pro-environmental behaviour being really powerful. And I just wondered, Miranda, if you could just say a little bit more about how you're planning to sort of elucidate that relationship in your project. Sorry about the seagulls, by the way.
Okay, so in the questionnaire that we give to participants after the activity, we're asking them about their experience of it, but also asking them about their future intention, and thinking a bit about if that experience is going to change anything that they do. Would they want to do something like this again, and how could they interact with nature in the future? So that's how we'll be assessing it.
That's great, thank you. So do we have any other questions for our speakers? Feel free just to pop up your hand if you'd prefer to do that. Okay, well, there'll be more time. Just if you think of questions, just pop them in the chat. And so in that case, I think we will move on to our next part of the programme. And I will hand back to Andy. Thank you.
Muted again. Yeah, so it's often hard to think of questions kind of on the spot like that. I think that was 5 absolutely fantastic presentations, and I'm absolutely fascinated by all of them. So what we have now is another short networking session before our final speaker. And you're again going to be put into random breakouts of 3, and this time we would like to discuss the questions that I am about to put in the chat now. Oh no, that Joe has already put in the chat, which is fantastic. So it's about discussing what we've heard today, basically. What's been of most interest to you? What ideas or questions have this sparked off for you? What do you want to know more about? How does this connect with your work or your research interests? So a more easy and open and inviting and friendly and intimate way to discuss the presentations than just a straightforward question and answer session. So I think Mark is going to put us back into breakout groups, and we will come back. Should we give us 10 minutes for this? Hey, is everyone back? I hope you've had a good chat, good discussion. Hope you've made some new contacts. So we're now moving on to our final speaker, and it is my pleasure to present our second keynote, Professor Helen Chatterjee, who I assume is right now lining up her slides. So Helen is Professor of Biology at UCL, but she is speaking to us today in her role of Director for Health Disparities at the AHRC, although we may get her back one time to talk about her actual research, which revolves around the connections between the health of the environment and the health of people. So Helen, the floor is yours. We will have some time for questions at the end, and if there are any more questions that have come up as a result of the last discussions, we might, for previous speakers, we may be able to squeeze them in too. So all yours, Helen.
Thanks, Andy. It's lovely to be here. It's been fantastic to hear about your projects. I'm a zoologist working on biodiversity conservation, so many of you might be wondering how I ended up in this role, but I'll explain that at a later date. Yeah, so I'm really interested in those intersections between the health of the environment and the health of people, as Andy say, and that's really what's led me to work initially with AHRC, Arts and Humanities Research Council. I have a background looking after a university zoology museum, which is how I ended up in this space in terms of arts and culture. And I've always been interested in that notion of how community assets, community organisations, the assets and resources we have within communities, how can they be interlinked to support the health and the quality of those people that live there, and that includes the local biodiversity and the local quality of the green space, all those local cultural assets. So that's how I got into this. And I've been working with AHRC. I've been funded by AHRC for about 15 years, which is slightly odd being a zoologist. But they invited me to come and work with them at a strategic level about 3 years ago to help rethink their funding strategy. So they funded our research. We developed programs around museums and natural space, social prescribing. They funded for many years work that we've done in that space, looking at the intersections between the links between arts, culture and natural assets and how they link in with health and health inequalities. And they came and invited me to join their body of work at strategic level to think about their funding. So to that end, I helped them develop a whole new research programme. The research programme, part of my role was to work across UKRI, and that's why you'll see all of these other research councils, including NERC and the Medical Research Council and ESRC, really trying to tackle these big, what I call ecosystem-wide problems, which many of you have been talking about here today. And the fact that we need to, in order to tackle these sorts of wider ecosystem problems, we really need different types of brains working on these problems. We need different types of disciplines, we need different types of methods, different types of data, and different ways of integrating that data to understand these wider issues of how we link up things like health inequalities with the quality of green space or the quality of our local cultural or community assets. So to that end, I've been working with them, like I say, for 3 years, and this programme is a multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary, multi-year programme supported by the other research councils. I've brought in a series of other partners, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And we're currently in the first phase of this programme, which started in November. That's when I took up the official role as a programme director, working for UKRI. At the minute, I'm working about 40%, so I still have all of my other stuff going on at UCL, but I'll be upping that to about 80% from January next year for the next 4 years, because we've just funded £1.5 million worth of research projects, many of which are very similar to the sorts of projects you've heard here, really interesting intersections, exploring and bringing together different types of scholarship with practice and policy. And we've just committed to funding another £3 million to fund phase 2, which is all about consortium building, which I'll talk briefly about. The deadline closes on Monday, so I'm afraid it's probably a little bit late to apply for that, but we've also committed to funding 20 million in phase 3 from 2024 onwards to fund about 10 consortia of about £1 to £2 million each. So stay tuned, there is more money at the end of this. So what are we all about? So I've talked about these challenges around these ecosystem-wide problems, and that is really what this programme is all about tackling. What we're interested in is developing testable and replicable collaborative models across different types of community assets within the changing structures of health, social and community care. And it's really all about better integration between communities and community assets and these changing structures of healthcare. When we talk about community assets, we include everything from your green and blue spaces through to arts, culture, libraries. It could be social networks, community centres, youth clubs, really anything that is classically defined as a community asset. And when we talk about integration, we're really talking about any opportunities for integration across the health system. We've got a particular focus on things like integrated care systems, because we know that health systems are currently undergoing major changes in England. Similarly, across Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, we've seen similar attempts to think about better integration. And a large focus for that integration is around better links with the VCSE sector. So our programme is really about better understanding these links between these assets and in particular health inequalities at local and regional levels. And really what we're interested in is arguing is that we've got some fantastic examples, and you've heard some of them today, of how organisations locally, nationally and regionally are working to support some of the most vulnerable members of society. And these are some of these sorts of interventions, because they cross morbidities, because they cross age groups, because they cross health conditions, are actually really fantastic ways of thinking about supporting the levelling up agenda. But what we know in that community ecosystem is that it's very, very friable, it's very variable, and there's a huge reliance on short-term project funding, which makes it really difficult for community organisations, whatever their size, to think about supporting health inequalities at these local and regional levels. So what we're interested in doing is understanding these complexities, and particularly thinking about these barriers and enablers for better integration between these sort of local asset ecosystems and then the wider public health ecosystems. So how can we mobilise these two giant ecosystem bodies to work better together closely to tackle these issues around inequalities, and also to tackle some of these wider issues that you've already been talking about today, things like net zero, biodiversity loss, quality of the green and blue space, quality of our other assets, things like degradation to public buildings, etc. So the biggest challenge that we have for us is really around how best to converge the sorts of data and learning from local and hyperlocal levels that you've been hearing about today to help inform the spread and adoption of this more collaborative working across the UK. And that is really what this whole research programme with UKRI is about. So I've mentioned that the 12 pilot projects that we've funded already, you can see those listed here on the right-hand side of that slide. These are quite small investments. They got about £180,000 each. We funded 12 of them. As you can see, there's a really broad range of them. Some of them are focused on thinking about how we can get people from backgrounds who are not used to swimming into wild swimming and what the benefits of wild swimming might be, through to things like creativity at early ages and in maternity and health, other aspects of young person's healthcare. Our role in the National Directorate Research Project is really around coordinating that research and helping to take that kind of learning at these local and hyperlocal levels within a health systems model to help understand these barriers and enablers to enable better partnership working. We're working with a whole range of national partners, including the National Centre for Creative Health, and I can tell you more about that if people are interested, along with lots of other arms and bodies like the National Centre for Creative Health, things like the Health Creation Alliance, the Health Inequalities Alliance, the National Academy for Social Prescribing, and we work closely with lots of different types of colleagues across NHS, particularly the personalised care group. So as well as that kind of supporting pilot projects and overseeing the National Programme of Work Research, really how I describe our National Programme Research is around ecosystem mapping. I've talked about the barriers and enablers, but a big challenge for us is around the different types of data and integrating that different data to understand these big ecosystem problems. So if there's anybody out there who's really interested in that and has expertise in that area, we'd love to hear from you. The sorts of data that people have been talking about today are some of the challenges that we have, where you've got, for example, psychological report data that might tell you something about psychosocial outcomes for individuals, through to then population health data, through to things like indices of deprivation, things like land use data, things like biodiversity data. Some of the speakers have been talking about air quality data, asset mapping. So there's lots of different types of data out there that can help us understand the complexity of this ecosystem. But I think where we need work is really how to integrate that data. A big aspect for us is around the economic cost benefits of this sorts of partnership working, which we know the evidence base is very, very poor on. Understanding the economic and financial implications of partnership working is really fundamental to getting this partnership working more embedded within the structures of public health. So a lot of our work is also this kind of thing, knowledge exchange, thinking about what kinds of translational activities and stakeholder engagement are going to help to lead to the kind of changes that we need to bring about at systems level to support levelling up. So we're also really keen to hear your views and continue the discussions with Andy and Jess and others on your project and how we can better learn from each other. And I really think there is a lot of value in that, the collective voice and the power of that collective voice. So now I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to spend too long talking about the sorts of ecosystem mapping we're doing, but it's been really interesting for us just getting a sense of a lot of our projects you'll see are very similar to the sorts of projects that you guys are working on, is how we can take that learning from these local levels. So for us, just even simply mapping out where all the different partners are within each project, how that links into things like local deprivation data, local asset mapping data. So what is in a region is really, really highly correlated with your predictors for health. As you probably know, access to green space, etc., of course, is directly correlated with health inequalities. And so trying to bring those data together at that local level has been really crucial for us. So again, anybody shout out there if people are interested in that, the data science side, machine learning side, would be really keen to have a chat with you about that. I don't want to take up too much time because I know there's loads of fantastic discussions been going on in the breakout rooms. The call that I mentioned that closes on Monday is for grants of up to £250,000. Here we're looking to support consortiums of different types of academics to get together. That could be people like us who are interested perhaps in community asset working, from the nature, green and blue space, through to arts, cultural, heritage science, through to people working in community health, public health researchers, people working on inequalities, health economists, ecosystem services people. How can we bring those sorts of people together with people interested in looking to bring about change within health systems? And critically, the people with lived experience who are part of that wider ecosystem, whose voice is often not heard within thinking about health systems change. So a big part of this programme is about integrating what we might call lived experience or community researchers. That's a big part of this call. They're invited to actually be involved and funded at 100% as co-investigators, which I had to argue very hard for with the UKRI. And that means an individual participant, say, in a programme, say a green social prescribing programme, or indeed somebody running a green social prescribing programme, for example, can be involved in a research as an equitable partner. And the next stage for that research really is that individual consortiums and indeed other groups of people will be able to apply for then a 3-year research programme to deliver a £1 or £2 million consortium level, local or regional based consortium, to really try and bottom out and develop these testable models for what partnership working looks like at these local regional levels. So I'll end there, and so that everyone's got plenty of time. I'm sure you're all very tired after a warm afternoon of listening to some really brilliant talks, but very happy to share more details about the future of this programme. And please do get in touch if you're interested in being involved. I'll stop sharing.
That's great. Thank you very much, Helen. Okay, so we do have a few minutes for questions, either Helen or for any of the previous speakers, if anyone is inspired to ask. I don't think there's anything in the chat at the moment. If anyone wants to raise their hand, ideally using the raise hand function, because I can only see about a quarter of you on the screen at any one time. I'll just quickly ask a couple of questions. One very easy to answer, which is that Helen, so just to clarify, phase 3 of the project, when you're actually looking for consortia to develop research programs, that's not just limited to those consortia that take part in phase 2, the consortium development phase, is it? So
it's not, absolutely. So
if there are people here who are already building consortia, which you know, to an extent they are with some of the QUENCH projects, when that phase 3 funding call comes out, they would be eligible for that. Yeah, they
would be, absolutely, and that's what we recognise. There are loads of initiatives like yours, things like Thriving Communities Fund on a much smaller scale, but things like the UK Prevention Research Networks. Those there are already established consortia who are very interested in this. So we would be keen for a wide diversity. One of the things that we can offer is that kind of how best to link up at perhaps those sort of local regional levels, which you know, what we hear a lot from is community organisations super keen to do the research, but sometimes struggling to find academics who are either interested or have the capacity or the skills to be able to support that kind of research. So we can help with that kind of linking up.
That's great, and I think that also answers a question that's just appeared in the chat from Louise. Is phase 3 likely to fund industry partners at all?
Yeah, I mean, that is a tricky one. So we're actually having conversations with Innovate UK about exactly that. So at the minute, industry partners are actually excluded from applying. That doesn't include things like CICs or CIOs, community interest countries, community interest organisations are eligible to apply. But the best thing to do is look at the UKRI guidance around what an industry partner is. There's quite specialised in guidance on that, what an industry partner looks like. And often people who think they might not be eligible, organisations they are. AHRC UKRI can provide guidance on that, but like I say, we are in discussions with Innovate UK, and from my perspective, I'm really keen on thinking about that the business. We've got a piece of work running at the minute where we're looking at, for example, business for health partnerships, and increasingly we're seeing examples of, for example, business funding, social prescribing through corporate social responsibility, other sorts of financial models for supporting community health interventions and programs.
Thank you. And you talked a bit about kind of sharing and spreading the learning from previous phases, and this being a key thing that you do and you want to do. So how will the learning from phase 1 be communicated? Will the kind of outcomes and the results from all these different projects be kind of collated and made available in a joint way somehow?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we're doing at the minute is having just a series of discussions, workshops. We've also got a survey. I know people are surveyed out, but if I can put it in the chat and persuade anybody who's got the motivation to complete it, it's really about that wider partnership working. So we'll be doing a kind of meta-analysis of all of that, working with all of this. And I see that Jodie's put in the chat about the NAS Thriving Communities funded projects. And these are for those people that don't know, maybe Jodie can put a link in the chat. Again, really fantastic problems projects where local community organisations have been working collaboratively together to explore this notion of collaboration. And so what we're doing is gathering data and intel from all of them and doing some meta-analyses on that. We're then working closely with organisations like NAS, National Centre for Creative Health, and NHS Personalised Care to think about the more translational aspect of that. We're really keen as well, obviously, to link up with you guys and the sorts of projects you're doing here, but to think about that wider communication piece. I was just chatting privately with Dave from Natural England about how we best might do that, because I think there's many different organisations, arms length bodies, national organisations, the strategic organisations I mentioned, like the Health Inequalities Alliance, who are interested in the sorts of data and learning that we are gathering. So I think we have a lot of people interested in hearing from us. The issue is, as many of you know, is that the kind of cross-government working and the cross-strategy working is very, very challenging. So I really think that the collective voice is going to be helpful there. So any suggestions you have and input that you guys would like to have on that, we'd really love to hear from you. And obviously, Andy, you and Jess and I will continue to have conversations around the linkage between our two programmes.
Yeah, absolutely. I will look forward to having future conversations with you about that, and looking forward to seeing the results of this programme. So hopefully that will provide some of the kind of data and results that we need to get, to find the funding and investment to consistently mainstream green social prescribing. Because we have people in DEFRA who are saying, we know this works, we know that this should be mainstream, but there is just no, it's not consistently recognised as such, and the funding is not there for either organisations or for NHS organisations to push that through. Okay, that was brilliant. Thank you very much indeed.
The link to the survey in the chat. I'll put it in the chat, and please forward that on to your partners. Thank you very much, guys. Really lovely to hear from your project.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, thanks very much, Helen. And so I'm just going to hand over to Mark to wrap everything up. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you, Andy. And thank you, everyone, for sticking with us for 2 hours. I hope that you've enjoyed today's session. I certainly learned quite a lot and have made a lot of scribblings down. And hopefully you had a chance to do a little bit of networking online and meet new people or talk to old friends, establish contacts. So just a kind of few things to kind of finish off as the drilling goes on in our building. One is that you can follow us. So if you're not following us on Twitter, or you have Twitter, get on it. So we have a Twitter account which is @QUENCH-network, and we provide quite frequent updates from the network on that. We also have our own website. I'll put the links to both the Twitter account and the website in the chat. We do have a mailing list, so if you're not already on that, please do sign up to that. And again, we provide updates of the projects on that. Today's session is being recorded, so we'll make that available, and we'll put out through those channels when that's available and how to get hold of it as well. So I'll probably go through the website. Other than that, just to again thank you all for coming, and to wish you all the best for today, and a bit of a chat time to get outside and enjoy this wonderful weather that hopefully we're all having. So thank you all for coming, and I hope to see you all soon.
Bye.
Thanks very much.